Hi you guys, I have your science lesson for Monday, November 9th. Today, your science lesson has 3 parts. First, you are going to complete an observation of our control ecosystem, which I have right here. If you have not completed this observation yet, please pause the video, go back into the science assignment, and complete that first. If you have completed that, you are ready to move on to the next step. Today we're going to be starting our acid rain experiment. And with every single scientific experiment that we complete, we have to follow the scientific method. Step number 1 is to observe. If you just completed your observation of the ecosystem, that means that you are done with that step. We have been observing these ecosystems for a few weeks now, and writing our noticings down and drawing them in our science notebooks. These observations give us information about the ecosystem and what we might want to study. The second step of the scientific method is to come up with a question. Since we're learning about pollution right now, the question that we're going to be asking for our experiment is what happens to an ecosystem when acid rain falls? When acid rain is used to water the plants in the ecosystem, what happens to the plants and animals that are parts of that ecosystem and the non-living things too? Before we start our actual experiment, I'm going to kind of explain how it's going to work, and then your third job today will be to write a hypothesis. So I have here both our control ecosystem and the ecosystem that we will be polluting. The reason we have a control ecosystem is because if we don't leave one ecosystem unharmed and untouched, then we won't know what the difference is once we introduce the pollution of acid rain. So here is my ecosystem that's going to get polluted. It's just like all of our other ones. It has isopods and crickets in the top. There's 4 different plants growing, and then we have the duckweed, Elodea, mosquito fish, and snails in the aquarium. Because I cannot get actual acid rain, I'm going to create something that will imitate it using water and vinegar. We know from the reading that you did today that vinegar is an example of an acid. But I can't just use vinegar to imitate the acid rain because it's too acidic. In order to create something that's similar to acid rain, I have to dilute it. And that means I take a little bit of this acid and I add it to a lot of something neutral, like water. So I took a few teaspoons of this acidic vinegar and I added it to a bottle full of water. Now before I put it into the ecosystem to imitate the acid rain, I need to make sure that this is actually the correct pH or the correct acidity that's the same as acid rain. We have a pretty cool tool that we can use to measure acidity, and that is this pH tape. It comes in a roll, kind of like dental floss or like Scotch tape. And what I can do is I can rip off a piece of this tape and I dip it into the solution that I want to measure the acidity of. So I'll unscrew this. I'll dip the paper in. And you can see that it's already changing color. I'm going to let it sit for a few seconds and let the color change finish. And once it's done, I will compare it to these colors on the front of the container. Whichever one it matches will tell me the pH of the solution. So what I'm doing now is I'm comparing it to the colors, and I see that the tape that I just dipped is just about exactly the same color as the square under pH 3.5, if you can see that. That means that the pH of my solution of vinegar and water is 3.5. It tells me that it is acidic. And if I compare it to the pH scale that we read about in our reading assignment today, you'll see that the range of pH for acid rain goes from about 1.5 to 5.5. And if I find 3.5 on that scale, that's exactly in the middle. So pH of 3.5 is right where I want it to imitate acid rain in my ecosystem. Now that we've prepared our acid rain, I want you to pause a moment and think. When I spray this acid rain into our ecosystem, what is going to happen? That is our hypothesis. Step number 3, writing a hypothesis or making a prediction. Before we complete our experiment, it is important for us to think about what we've learned about ecosystems, about pollution, about acid rain, and make a prediction for what's going to happen when we introduce that acid rain to the ecosystem. Your third job today is to write that hypothesis in your science notebook entry. You will write something along the lines of, when we water the ecosystem with acid rain, I think that this might happen to the plants, this might happen to the animals, this might happen to the soil or the water or the air. Write down whatever predictions you have so that when we're done with the experiment, we can circle back and see if we were correct. Once you have completed your observation and written down your hypothesis in your science notebook entry, it's time for us to pollute. So I am simply spraying these plants. I'm watering the terrarium with our acid rain mixture. And this is going to imitate what it is like for an ecosystem in our world to be watered by real acid rain. There you have it. I don't notice any difference yet, other than a kind of a funny smell. But we will be paying attention over these next week or two to see the impact and see if our hypothesis was correct. Once you've completed that observation and written your hypothesis, submit a picture of it to this assignment in Schoology.